Haley. I am a student engagement strategist here in the Career Center at Fordham. I've worked in the office for about 6-ish years now, and I graduated from FCLC in December of 2019. So kind of been around the office for a little while. And so today we're going to kind of chat a little bit about negotiating salary, and just kind of some tips for going about that, since that can be a little bit of an intimidating kind of topic for people.
Okay.
All right. So here, let me pause it real quick. I'm just going to ask you a couple questions. Okay. All right, so in terms of salary negotiation, again, this is something that a lot of people find very intimidating. Just talking about money in general and then trying to ask for more is definitely a little bit of a strange kind of process. So in the application stage and kind of during interviews for a job, you sometimes might be asked by the employer kind of either your salary history or your salary expectations. And so this can be challenging, right? Especially if you're, kind of in the first stage of an interview or just applying, you're not really sure, right? You're not sure kind of what the job entails. You're not sure kind of what is the norm. And so we talk about this technique called like deflection. And so this is basically kind of trying to kind of skirt past those questions initially until you have a little bit more information so that you can kind of make a more informed kind of a ballpark of what you're expecting in terms of salary. And so again, in terms of this kind of deflection, so, if you are kind of asked that in a very early interview, it's best to kind of make it clear that you want to learn more about the job before answering that question, that you're not quite sure kind of what your salary expectation is yet, if you're not quite sure of all of the requirements of the job, you're not quite sure of the benefits. And so, like sort of this quote here, just saying something like, I'd like a little bit more time, learn about the role a little bit more before I set my salary expectations, or kind of a little bit more directly kind of asking like, what is the typical salary for someone in this position at this company? So that, you're not kind of completely blindly saying, I don't know, 30K, right? Like just throwing out a number that like, you're not quite sure. And also, again, sometimes in applications, they might ask you to, kind of like write down what your expected or targeted salary is. Again, when you don't have enough information, you're able to just kind of put dashes or 0, market rate, NA. Again, just kind of delaying this conversation a little bit until you know a bit more about the job. All right, and so in several states, actually, it's either illegal or will soon be illegal for people to ask like what your salary history is. So that's definitely kind of something to be aware of. So again, if you get that question, somebody asking, well, what did you kind of make at your last job? You might not be, you're never kind of required to answer that. And again, it might even be illegal for them to be asking you that. So that's kind of something to be aware of. And if they are kind of asking that, that's kind of something to note, right? Like if that is a bit of a red flag of, kind of why are they asking me this question? And so if you do share your salary requirements ahead of time, if, initially you do kind of give a ballpark, after you learn more about the job and realize, perhaps that was a bit on the low side, considering all of the requirements and expectations of this job, you can definitely go back and say, something like this. Now that I've learned more about this position, I think the salary requirements, I'd like to kind of reassess that and discuss that again. So again, trying to deflect that question until you have a bit more information. All right, and so what does that kind of information gathering look like so that you can make a more kind of informed response to that question? So this is going to require, researching the job a little bit. So there's different aspects, right? Kind of assessing the market. So, kind of whatever industry you're in, whatever kind of specific role you're in, doing a little bit of research about kind of what is the norm, right? Like what is that typical salary range? And also thinking, specifically about if you're applying to a particular company, looking at that company, their competitors, kind of what's going on in that industry in general. And again, kind of knowing some of the area demographics, right? Like a salary in New York City, for example, is going to be different than a salary in rural Ohio, right? Like it's going to depend on kind of where people are, cost of living, kind of things like that. And so the Bureau of Labor Statistics is a really wonderful resource, and they do have it kind of broken down by different states, by different cities, by different industries. So again, you can get a really like specific snapshot of, okay, what are, middle school teachers in New York City typically making, so that you really can make an informed kind of, estimate of what you are expecting. Okay. And so, again, you want to kind of back up, if you bring this information to that employer, you want to be able to back it up a little bit, right? Be able to say, I've done my research. I've looked at, the Bureau of Labor Statistics site, I've looked at some of these other sites, and this seems to be the normal range, right? You kind of want to have some data to kind of back that up. So again, here are some other really, really great resources to take a look at, again, what are the norms? So I know a lot of people use Glassdoor. That's a really common one because people are able to anonymously kind of write, what company they're at, what their position is, and what their salary is. And sometimes people will also kind of write about their experiences a little bit more broadly. So I know that that's kind of a very, very common site. Obviously, Indeed, which is another kind of, job site. They do kind of have some of those statistics as well. Through Handshake, which is the portal that Fordham uses, we also have some of those statistics. And then, down at the bottom, looking at on our Fordham website, every year we collect data from the graduating class to see where students are working, kind of what industries, and we do ask their salary, and a lot of students are kind of willing to share that with us. So that's another really great resource to see, even more specific, right? Like, what is a middle school teacher graduating from Fordham last year? What is the typical of what they're making? So again, really great to kind of have some of those real statistics and real data to kind of back up your case when you are negotiating. All right, so again, now you've kind of deflected that initial question, right? You kind of bought yourself a little bit of time. You've started doing some of that research to see what it really does look like, kind of what those expectations are. And now you're kind of ready to circle back and kind of open that negotiation conversation. So, again, like we said, with that research, kind of learning everything you can about the company, learning about what the typical salary is, learning about the benefits as well. And we'll kind of chat about that towards the end. Kind of one great thing to do when you're negotiating your salary is just kind of emphasizing your value, your experience, kind of why you're a good fit for the job, right? You have to do a little bit of kind of marketing of yourself when you're kind of applying to jobs and interviewing. And so, obviously that ties to kind of cover letters that you might be writing for jobs, obviously your resume, your LinkedIn, just kind of all ways to show off the skills that you have, the experience that you had, and kind of your value. And so, as you can see kind of on this slide, a value statement, is a kind of nice summary, almost like compiling some of those things. So again, it really highlights your strengths and capabilities, and can be a really nice kind of guide for that negotiation conversation. So kind of as you can see at the bottom, sorry, I gotta move this little icon so I can see it. Kind of saying, in my previous job, I accomplished X, Y, and Z, right? Kind of something concrete that you accomplished using, my organizational skills, using my communication skills, kind of some sort of skills that you use. Again, whether that's more general or something more concrete, right? If you're using specific, softwares or things like that, just kind of highlighting those different skills you had. And then that was benefited by, again, this is either kind of the company that you worked at previously, or you can say, would be really applicable to this company that I'm applying to. So again, this is kind of a sort of like boiled down statement of really encompassing some of those things that can be helpful. And it's also, important, obviously, when you're walking into a negotiation to sort of anticipate what some of their responses might be, right? If you have them saying, oh, well, we really don't have it in the budget, or, we're not sure if, kind of your skills are, kind of worthy of this higher kind of pay grade, right? Just sort of anticipating what some of those like more negative responses might be. And just kind of having a plan of like, all right, if this, the hiring manager responds this way, what am I going to do in response? Kind of how can I kind of counteract that a little bit? So again, a little bit of rehearsal, a little bit of practice, and our office can definitely help with that as well. All of our counselors can help with, either mock interviews or kind of helping with some of these conversations or planning that. But just being a little bit prepared of, in case you don't get them saying, yeah, you're right, which, sometimes you might get a little bit of pushback. Okay. And so here on this slide, we have just a few sort of, examples of like what a statement might look like. So, as you can see, this top one, thank you for meeting with me to discuss your offer. Looking forward to joining the team. Do you have any flexibility in the salary? Again, kind of backing it up. According to my research, according to XYZ sources, the typical salary range for someone with my qualifications in this role is kind of whatever that range might be. So again, kind of backing it up, having some of that data to back it up. And we'll kind of, again, we'll circle back in terms of this last statement. So, thank you for the job offer. I've reviewed the salary package, which I'm happy with, but I had some questions about the benefits package, especially telecommuting options. So, right, obviously there's this salary aspect, but then there's also, tends to be sort of other perks for lack of a better word in terms of, the different benefits. So that's also something to weigh as well. And we'll chat about that either on the next slide or the one after. Okay, we'll get to it. All right, so again, in terms of just some more basic kind of negotiation tactic tips, like I said, you want to be prepared, right? You want to, keep your notes in front of you. And one of the nice things, like especially now that, most interviews are, via tele platforms, kind of via Zoom or Google Meet or things like that. The nice thing is you can have a little kind of cheat sheet for yourself, right? If you kind of do get tripped up in that conversation, you do kind of have some of your notes to look back on. So that's always kind of helpful to, again, just kind of be prepared, have some of your talking points ready. It's also important to remember that it's a conversation, right? Like you're not trying to go in there, trying to be combative or trying to be, difficult or anything like that. But it's really just kind of advocating on your behalf, right? Kind of recognizing what your value is and, kind of trying to get that. And so again, it's a conversation. So I think it's also important to, kind of make your points, but also listen to what, kind of the hiring manager might be saying, right? So, learning more about what the employer wants and needs, just building on kind of every exchange, taking notes, again, after those conversations, remaining flexible, having those good listening skills, again, just making sure it is kind of a conversation and not just you kind of fighting to get exactly what you want. All right, and so this is an important one and kind of keeping it on your professional life. And so this one can be challenging, right? Because especially when we're talking about money, which is, sometimes a taboo subject to begin with, right? And, we're paying off student loans, you're trying to just kind of pay rent, kind of pay for various expenses. Sometimes you might feel kind of called to mention some of these things, right? Some of these expenses that you're trying to juggle. Because again, obviously the professional and the personal life definitely overlap in so many ways. But in terms of kind of negotiating salary, we tend to recommend against kind of bringing up too much of your personal life kind of in that conversation. Again, you're going to do a little bit better kind of backing it up with more sort of data and research rather than kind of, appealing to all the things kind of going on in your personal life. And again, there is so much overlap between the personal and professional lives, but salary negotiation might not be kind of the best place to really interject those too much. And like I mentioned, again, anticipate some responses, be prepared that, you might not get the most enthusiastic response kind of on the first try, kind of just having some of those, kind of responses prepared and thinking about what they might say. And also just kind of asking for time, right? Like if you're in the middle of a conversation about salary, perhaps you're getting a little bit flustered, you're getting a little bit overwhelmed. it's okay to kind of ask for time, right? And say, can I have a few days to kind of think over what we've spoken about? Again, most of the time they'll be understanding of that, unless it's, for some reason a very, very tight, kind of crunch deadline. But again, just saying, I need a few days to kind of think over everything we've spoken about, just review these materials, so I can really make kind of an informed decision. So that's definitely okay to do. All right. And so, yeah, in terms of knowing your value, this is definitely an important one. And this is, obviously applicable to applying to full-time jobs or applying to internships or, applying to grad school, kind of all of those different things. Just kind of keeping a record of all of your accomplishments, right? Like you kind of have a lifetime full of great things that you've done, really great experiences, great skills that you've picked up. And so it is important to kind of keep track of those things. And, so kind of as you can see here, just collecting like images or articles or, kind of writings or just kind of any other materials that can really speak to your value. And, again, kind of this idea of like a kudos file, right? Kind of keeping those things in a folder, it's almost like a, portfolio of sorts of kind of your different accomplishments. And also it's just kind of a morale boost for you, right? Like it's nice to kind of have your work recognized and recognize all of the different things that you have accomplished. And so again, that's a great kind of reminder to yourself as well, because it definitely can be, a little bit discouraging sometimes when you're in the job search or you're in the middle of kind of those negotiations. And so again, a great reminder kind of for yourself and then to kind of use obviously in those negotiations. Okay, and so another kind of idea in terms of this recognizing your value aspect, just kind of keeping a journal of your activities, right? Like at work, kind of for example, I like helped run this event and I did X, Y, and Z. Again, just kind of keeping track. It can even be small things, but just recognizing all of those different activities that you are participating in. And again, it doesn't have to necessarily be things in the workplace or in the classroom. Like it can also be pursuing a hobby or volunteering, taking on leadership positions. Again, it can definitely show, speak to your well-roundedness. It doesn't have to be just specifically kind of within your field, within your kind of niche, job aspect. And then kind of another idea, like emailing yourself every Friday with what you accomplished that week, right? Like it can even be just a couple lines, a couple bullet points. But again, just kind of reminding yourself of your value and of what you really bring to the table. Okay, and so now kind of this benefits aspect that I spoke about briefly before. So again, kind of negotiating the benefits is just as important as negotiating your salary, because that really is kind of another part of it. Obviously I won't speak, to kind of the specifics of, kind of health insurance and things like that. But again, it's just something to really be aware of. So, benefits are part of your overall compensation. And so, again, I think with this, also kind of doing your research, seeing like what is typical for people in your specific role, in your specific industry, kind of what health insurance like works for you, kind of retirement things, just again, taking a more like holistic view of like, what am I really benefiting from this company and from taking this job? Okay. And so, yeah, again, kind of this can encompass so many different sorts of things, right? It could be tuition reimbursement. It could be like relocation expense coverage or childcare assistance, kind of asking questions about, again, the insurance, if kind of what those premiums look like, whether they match the 401k contributions and kind of other like retirement savings aspects. Paid time off, what does that tend to look like? What is that vacation time? Obviously now, a big question is whether the job is remote or in person, or if there's room for hybrid or kind of what that looks like. Obviously, whether there is, a signing bonus, which does tend to be kind of monetary. And also just asking like what does employee wellness look like? Like what kind of resources do they have for employees? What kind of programs do they have? Again, just taking a really like holistic view of like, what would I be benefiting kind of beyond my, bi-weekly paycheck? Okay, and I think that's pretty much.
You cut me loose and set me free. You make me win.